The sharp clang of metal on metal jolted John Parker awake, his eyes snapping open to the dim gray of his Texas ranch house, the clock glowing 4:22 a.m. He rolled out of bed, heart racing, the sound echoing from the barn like a call to battle. He grabbed his rifle from the wall, its cold steel grounding him as the burn on his forearm throbbed, a lingering scar from Mary Ellen's fire. The noise wasn't the wind or a loose hinge. It was deliberate, rhythmic, a hammer striking iron in the dead of night. Out here on his 200-acre spread, the dark hid threats. And after Wheeler's fence-cutting crew and his kids' legal betrayal, John knew this wasn't a coincidence. He pulled on his boots, the leather stiff with mud from the storm, and stepped onto the porch. The cool March air sharp against his skin. The lake shimmered under a waning moon, but beyond it, the barn loomed dark, its silhouette broken by a faint flicker of light. Someone was inside, and they weren't there to fix anything. He crept across the yard, rifle raised, his limp from an old war wound slowing his stride, but not his resolve. The night was still, crickets silent under the weight of dawn's approach, and the clang grew louder, steady, insistent, a blacksmith's beat. He reached the barn door, its hinges creaking as he eased it open, and peered into the shadows. Lantern light danced on the walls, casting jagged shapes, and there, hunched over Dusty's stall, was a figure, broad-shouldered, gray hair glinting, hammer in hand, pounding a horseshoe against an anvil John hadn't touched in years. The man turned, his face weathered and familiar, eyes locking with John's in a silent challenge. It was Frank Hensley, his old platoon sergeant from Vietnam, a ghost from 40 years past, standing in his barn like time had folded it on itself. John lowered the rifle, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Frank, what in the world are you doing here?" Frank set the hammer down, wiping sweat from his brow with a sleeve patched at the elbow. His voice gravelly but steady. "Heard you were in a fight, Parker. Figured you'd need a hand, or a hammer. Been a long time." John stepped closer, the lantern's glow illuminating Frank's lined face. Older, harder, but the same steel in his eyes that had pulled them through jungles and ambushes. "Long time don't cover it," John said, leaning the rifle against a post. "Last I saw you was 73. Saigon Fallon, you shipping out. How'd you find me?" Frank chuckled, low and dry, picking up the horseshoe, its edges still warm. "Word travels, even to an old drifter like me. Heard about your ranch trouble. Rustlers, lawsuits, some fool cutting your fence. Tracked you down from a buddy in Austin. Thought I'd see if the soldier I knew was still kicking." John's chest tightened, memories flooding back. Frank barking orders in the rain, dragging him from a ditch under fire. The weight of lost men they'd never shaken. "Still kicking," he muttered, but barely. "Wheeler's claiming my land, kids are suing, and now you're hammering in my barn at 4 in the morning. What's your play?" Frank straightened, his gaze piercing. "My play's helping you hold this place. Saw your mare's shoe loose yesterday. Fixed it. But I ain't just here for horses. You're in deep. John, deeper than Nom. Need someone who's seen worse." John nodded slow, the past a heavy shadow between them, and waved Frank inside. Dawn crept in, gray turning gold, as they sat in the kitchen. Coffee brewing on the stove, the court order from Wheeler's Grab crumpled on the table. "Kids say they didn't sell," John said, pouring mugs, steam curling in the cool air. "Wheeler's twisting it, claims the east stretch. Court's next week, but I'm losing ground." Frank sipped, his hands scarred from years John couldn't imagine. "Law's a slow fight. Wheeler's fast, dirty. You need leverage, something to push back." Before John could reply, hoofbeats sounded. Mary Ellen Carter, riding up on her gray mare, a basket of biscuits swinging from her saddle. She dismounted, her braid loose, her face tightening as she spotted Frank through the window. She climbed the porch, knocking soft, and John let her in, the kitchen filling with the scent of warm dough. "Who's this?" she asked, setting the basket down, her blue eyes wary. "Frank Hensley," John said, gesturing. "Old war buddy, showed up out of nowhere." Frank, Mary Ellen Carter, neighbor, friend. Frank tipped his head, polite but guarded. Mom, heard about your barn fire. Tough break. She nodded, pouring herself coffee. Tougher now. Wheeler's pushing us both. John's fence yesterday. My south line last week. You here to help? Frank's jaw set. If he'll have me. John leaned back, the weight of trust settling heavy. Could use it. Fence is up. But Wheeler's crew will be back. Bigger next time. Midday sun blazed as they rode out. John, Frank, Mary Ellen. Checking the east fence, the cut post still raw in the earth. Tom Carter joined them. His bay, gelding kicking dust, his broad frame tense but eager. Ma said you've got company, he called, nodding at Frank. Wheeler hit our gate too. Hinges bent. I'm in. John tossed him a hammer from Dusty's saddlebag. Good. Fix what you can. Frank's with us. They worked through the heat, pounding posts, stringing wire, sweat soaking their shirts. A quiet rhythm binding them. Frank moved slow but sure, his hands steady from years of survival. And John watched him, the past flickering, Frank's laugh over a campfire, his shout in a firefight. The silence after Eddie fell. Dusk painted the lake orange, the air cooling. When Jake's truck rolled up, Sarah and Matt climbing out, faces grim but determined, a thick folder in Matt's hand. John met them by the fence, rifle slung over his shoulder, the court order a constant ache in his pocket. Found something? He asked, voice low. Matt nodded, opening the folder. Old papers, yellowed and creased. Mom's files from Houston. Divorce decrees here, but the page we need, property split, it's torn out. Someone got to it first. Sarah's eyes hardened. Wheeler's lawyer. Bet my life. We got a hearing in 5 days. Need that page. Jake kicked a post, frustration boiling. We didn't sell, Dad. Swear it. Wheeler's playing us all. John's chest eased. Suspicion fading to resolve. Believe you. But we're holding the line till then. Fence is up. Help me keep it. They nodded. A fragile alliance reborn. And night fell with a plan. Jake and Matt on watch, Sarah prepping tools, Frank and Tom scouting the lake. John rode with Frank at midnight, the water a dark mirror under a starry sky. Their lanterns casting long shadows. You ever think about it? John asked, voice quiet. Nah, Eddie, the others. Frank's face tightened, his grip on the reins white-knuckled. Every day. You? Same, John said, the weight of lost men a shared burden. This fight feels like that. Losing ground, holding on. Frank nodded, his voice low. We held then. We'll hold now. Headlights flared at 2 a.m. Wheeler's truck, Caleb at the wheel, a crew of 6 spilling out with crowbars and wire cutters, their silhouettes menacing in the dark. John and Frank dismounted, rifles raised, Tom joining from the brush, hammer in hand. Back off, John barked, voice steel over the lake's lap. This is my land, court or no court. Caleb smirked, lighting a cigarette. It's glow-a-taunt. Step aside, old man. Judge gave us the east. Your kids sold you out. Jake stormed from the shadows, shotgun leveled, Sarah and Matt flanking him with tools raised. We didn't sell. Jake growled, voice hard. Move, or we make you. Wheeler climbed out, cane tapping, his gray eyes narrowing at the united front. John, Frank, Tom, his kids. A wall of defiance stretching across the fence. You're fools, he rasped, his voice cutting through the night. This ain't over. You'll lose it all. He signaled retreat, the crew piling back. Caleb spitting into the grass. As they peeled off, taillights fading into the trees. John lowered his rifle, breathing hard, the fence standing tall for now. Back at the house. His kids crashed on the couch, Frank and Tom on the porch, exhaustion claiming them. Mary Ellen arrived at dawn, biscuits and coffee in hand, her gray mare tethered nearby. Her smile weary but fierce as she climbed the steps. Held the line again, she said, sitting beside him, the lake glowing soft in the early light. Barely, he muttered, the court order heavy in his pocket, his hand brushing hers as he took a mug. Frank's a ghost come back, brings the past with him. She squeezed his arm, firm and warm. Past makes you strong, John. Use it. He nodded. The fence up. Wheeler pushed back, his kids and Frank at his side, but the legal war loomed, a missing page holding his fate. Across the lake. A figure watched, binoculars glinting in the sunrise, then vanished into the dawn. John gripped the mug tighter, the rifle close, his voice a whisper. They'll be back stronger, and I'll be waiting.